Hello and welcome back, party people. So let's take a look. We're going to work on one of these horn images. We have this one and we have that one. That one's kind of a three-quarter view. Nice view of the lips. I like this one. We're going to open this up in Camera Raw. Camera Raw is a filter subset within Photoshop, and it is very, very powerful. In fact, we will probably do 80 to 90% of our photo editing in Camera Raw before we even go into Photoshop proper. And why do we do that? Well, there are two kinds of edits in Photoshop. There are destructive and non-destructive. Non-destructive edits are those kinds of edits that take place above the photograph. That is, the original photograph is protected, although everything that you see is changed. Imagine a photograph with different lenses on top. The lenses are the non-destructive edits, while a destructive edit would be you were scratching or painting or drawing directly on the photograph. And so Camera Raw performs only non-destructive edits. So the original photograph is always held in a secret, lockdown safe surrounded by armed guards and ninjas and pirates. So we've selected this image and we're coming up here and we're going to hit Open in Camera Raw. Another thing about working in Camera Raw is that it is more intuitive and more straightforward than Photoshop. And most of what we do in the basic panel, which is right here. And we have these sliders. So first of all, we have the image. We have our tool set up at the top. We have our histogram, which we will look at a lot. And then we have our sliders. The histogram is our guide. It is the scientific version of our eye. And what it does is that it takes the three channels, RGB, red, green, and blue, and it breaks it down into this mountain range. And we always aim for a mountain range that is evenly distributed between the left and the right. So, we'll talk about this a lot later, but let me just show you. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, most people just grab the big hammer and they move the exposure and they start moving this around. It's like, whoa, look at this. But that's for dummies, and you're not a dummy, so we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to start at the whites, and we're going to start moving the whites to make things lighter. Alrighty, we're moving it to the right, and we see that the histogram is moving to the right to even things out. That's good. Then we look at the shadows. We work up on the histogram, and that begins to even things out, and we look at the blacks, and we move that to the right, and that begins to even things out, and we can see where we came from if we hit P. Before, after, before, after. Already very nice. The highlights, so we've worked first with whites, and then blacks, or whites and shadows, and then blacks. Let's try the highlights. I don't know that the highlights need any work. Yeah, I'm moving them to the left, and that gives it a little punch. So, you look at two things. You trust your eye, and you look at the histogram. So take a look at the histogram now. All of these mountain peaks have moved to the right, so we have a more equitable spread. But we also hit P. Ooh, that's where we began. Bad. Ooh, good. Alrighty, so that's looking pretty good. Much better. And we're going to add a little bit of exposure. A little bit of exposure goes a long way. I like to add a little bit of contrast. Creates shadows, just a hair. It's like a strong spice. A little bit of clarity, a little bit of vibrance, just to make it pop. Personally, I prefer the square. I like to edit one-to-one. So now I'm going to edit this. I'm going to crop it. So really, what's important? Her neck? No. I think what makes it a more interesting photograph, take a look right here where her neck meets her shirt. We'll start it right there. So we've got a nice diagonal. We have another diagonal. We have strong geometry. We have foreground, we have background. I think it looks pretty good. So we hit Open Object. And this will open it up in Photoshop. And we wait for Photoshop to open up. And we wait. Good. And I'm going to reduce it a little bit. So, spacebar, Command Option is zoom out. And spacebar is the hand tool to move it around. And I'm going to use the crop tool to create a little white border. And there we go. So this is our finished photograph. If we double click over here, you see this little icon right here. It means that this is a smart object. It means that it is camera raw. If we double click back in there, we're back in camera raw, and we can see where we began and where we ended. Most of your editing you can do right here. Start with the whites and the blacks, then the shadows and the highlights. Exposure goes a long way. Use it with discretion. A little bit of clarity and a little bit of vibrance. Yeah. And that can add spice to all your photographs. Okay. Now I'm going to save this. I'm going to hit Shift Command S, which is also, well, let me get rid of that. It's also File, Save As, and I'm going to call it Horn. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document so that I can go back in and edit it. Then Shift Command S, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG so that I can post it on the interwebs. Boom. And then when I close this out, and close this out, here are my two images. The Horn Photoshop, so I can go back in and edit it, and the Horn JPEG. Now check this out. When I open, even though we're out of camera raw, if I open up the Horn PSD, and then click over here, booyah! I'm back in camera raw. Who would have thought such a thing was possible in the modern age? Okay, go into your photographs, use this basic panel, clean them up. Mostly what you'll find is that things are underexposed or overexposed, and this is where you can help the contrast and that. And you can also crop. Me, I like a square, but hey, you know, it's really up to you. Okay? So, go wild, go nuts, have fun.